I think there is the sense of kind of the political advocacy of standing in solidarity with pride movements around the world. When lots of small voices come together, that makes a very loud noise, and it changes hearts and minds and changes the conversation.
Hi, man. It is so nice to have you here, and thank you for joining us. Happy Pride.
Same
How
to
are
you.
you today?
Yeah, I'm good.
So, about All Out, we've read about what is All Out. It's a global movement for love and equality, but we would love to hear from you what is All Out, what all have you done, and what is it that you still want to achieve from all.
As you said, we are a global movement for love and equality. And that means we are an organization working for LGBT plus human rights around the world. Our mission is to work towards a world in which nobody anywhere has to sacrifice their family, their freedom, their safety, or their dignity because of who they are or who they love.
So you do so many things, starting from campaign to training to crowdfunding. Um, what motivated you to do so much for the community?
Well, that's a good question. So, what motivates us as a team and me personally as well is a sense, two things really that kind of come together. Firstly, the sense that there is still so much injustice and inequality in the world, a kind of cause around social justice to stand up and work to defeating that injustice and inequality. But kind of linked to that, the sense that we can win this, right? We're optimists, and we believe that the world is on a journey. It's a long and bumpy and difficult journey, but it is a journey that's still progressing towards equality everywhere. And so we bring together that sense of optimism with a sense of wanting to change the world positively.
I just wanted to add to this question, like Nandini said, what motivated you to do this, or what motivates your team? So I want to ask, how did this journey begin in the first place?
Yeah, I wasn't around for the beginning. I've been the executive director of All Out for 5.5 years. The organization is about 10 years old. The founders are two individuals called Andre Banks and Jeremy Hymans, who founded the organization back in 2011. And their vision was to create an organization where millions of ordinary citizens around the planet could participate in LGBT plus equality work. What they saw was that there wasn't really a space where folks who wanted to do something, but not necessarily give their blood and sweat and tears and all of their time, right? But were willing to sign a petition, make a donation, go to a fundraiser, smaller things, right? And they wanted to create a space where many people could do lots of small things. Whereas up until that time, it was a small number of people doing very large things, right? And they wanted to kind of flip that. And so we've developed this global community now. We have about 1 million active supporters around the world, people who we can call on to do small things. But when lots of small voices come together, that makes a very loud noise, and it changes hearts and minds and changes the conversation.
As you said that so many people making small changes, and even though the road towards progress is bumpy, it's still a great start. And talking about that journey, I want to know what are some challenges that you face as a member or an ally of the community.
Sure. So the challenges we face as an organization, so there are a few, right? So the first one, which I'm sure you're very aware of working with smaller nonprofits, is that we're on a kind of hamster wheel of funding, right? It's very difficult to maintain year after year after year the funding streams that are necessary for us to do our work. LGBT plus human rights is an area that is underfunded. across the world compared to many other areas of charitable work. So the funding challenge is a very big one. The second challenge we face is more related to the mission. And that's the fact that, like, to use the metaphor I used earlier of this long and bumpy road to equality, well, in the last few years, the bumps have become deeper and more difficult to maneuver, right? So across the world, we're seeing in so many countries some kind of backlash. So right now we have what's going on in Hungary, what's going on in Poland. We have 3 African countries where we're seeing arbitrary arrests of LGBT plus people in Cameroon, in Uganda, in Ghana. And so as we take 2 steps forward, we constantly need to take 1 step back and sometimes even 2 steps back. And so that challenge of the backlash is always there and always present. And then the third area I think I'd highlight as a challenge is, as a small organization, it's sometimes hard for us to achieve kind of cut through and awareness for our cause. We're just 17 people. We're distributed around the world, and we work very virtually, but we're only 17 people. And sometimes when we're working with a partner to bring an issue to the public's consciousness with our limited budgets and limited staff numbers, it's hard to do that.
It's really heartbreaking to listen to things happening all around the world to people just because of who they are and who they love. And from Goodera, we are trying our level best to connect you to corporate employees who add the maximum value for All Out. I just want to know, on the topic of the problems that you face, what are few things that you wish people knew about the community?
Yeah, so what we'd love people to know more about, I guess, like, first thing that comes to mind is, like, we believe in the power of storytelling, right? So we would love to be able to get the individual stories of individual members of the community to a wider audience, because this is not just about, like, the kind of dry and sometimes slightly boring details of legislation around equality. It's about individual lives. It's about people's careers, their families, and we want to bring the story of individual LGBT plus community members to a wider audience. We think that's a really important part of this. We'd also love to communicate more how working with us as a volunteer to do some kind of community fundraising, how those funds can have such a significant impact. There are community organizations that we work with as our partners and who we work with for crowdfunding, where really very small amounts of money could make a very big difference. These are organizations that work on a shoestring, right? Volunteers only, budgets of sometimes literally a few $100s every year. And, like, someone in one of your partner companies who runs a community fundraising event for All Out, who raises $500-600, that could be huge. That could be a significant impact. So we'd love to be able to communicate more how those small acts of fundraising can make a big difference on the ground to LGBT plus lives.
Another question that I have is, since you work on so many different areas and topics, and you've been working for 10 years All Out, so amongst the few things, what is one thing that you take pride in?
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing that, like, I personally take a lot of pride in because I was there and it was a very special moment. So one of the areas that we work on for our crowdfunding is to raise money for our partners to enable them to celebrate Pride in more difficult environments. So sometimes environments where being gay is criminalized. And one of those countries, we've done this in many countries, but one of those countries is a very small African country, a southern African country called Eswatini or Swaziland. It's near South Africa. So Eswatini, it's illegal to be gay. It's the last absolute monarchy in Africa. So it's not exactly the ideal place to try and run the first ever Pride. But when our partners from there came to talk to us and said, will you help us to run Pride? We just loved the kind of the audacity and daringness of this idea, right? So we said, yes, we'll help you. We'll raise the money. And so we did. We raised, and we were successful. We raised enough money to enable them to pay for security and logistics and catering and entertainment. And I had the privilege to travel to Eswatini to bring that message of love and solidarity from tens of thousands of people who'd all contributed very small amounts of money, an average of $10, that enabled us to bring together this large sum of money that enabled Pride in Eswatini to take place. And then on this bright, sunny day in 2018, around 300 people assembled on this sports field in the capital, Mbabane. People were telling me, you know what, this is not only the first ever Pride, this is the first time that more than about 10 of us have ever come together at the same place at the same time. And there was a really kind of electric feeling, and you could see people's personal batteries being charged up. And then when we were ready, we marched onto the streets for the first time, and it was peaceful. We'd had some threats of violence, but nothing happened. It was peaceful. These 300 people burst into this beautiful Southern African freedom songs, and we marched through the streets for the very, very, very first time, and it felt incredibly special, and I was very proud.
All Out has reached some really small cities, some really remote locations, some really conservative countries as well. So one thing I want to know, when you go there, when you support these smaller organizations, when you start these prides, and when all these people come together, what kind of change, or what is it that you see, and what do you think, how can the community support better? How can we come up together and support, in smaller cities, in smaller towns where there are so many biases already? How can in these smaller cities we come up and support the community better?
I think there is the sense of kind of the political advocacy of standing in solidarity with pride movements around the world. So another example that we've supported is Uganda. And Uganda is not such a happy story as Eswatini. It has been year after year. The attempt to celebrate Pride in Uganda has been brutally attacked by government forces and by the police. And one of the things that we've done in response to that at All Out is to run solidarity actions. Small things, small simple things where people, for example, would kind of just stand with a sign and say, I stand with Pride Uganda. And we send them those solidarity photographs so they can see that support around the world. That kind of thing is also useful. But the core thing really is that there is, this chronic underfunding that is taking place, but particularly in Africa, but also elsewhere. But there are other areas that we focus on as well. The opportunities don't come up super often on these other categories, but they do it from time to time, and we publish these to our corporate volunteer network. So one is translation work. So we operate in 6 core languages, English, French, German, Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese. And we have professional translators for those languages. But occasionally we need to operate outside of those 6 languages when we're working with a partner in a particular country.
We have listed down these things, and from Goodera's side, we are trying our best, Rashmika and team, consistently to get in touch with authentic volunteers who want to add value for a long period of time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for your time. It was so good to listen to all of that, and it was very insightful. And again, it motivates us to do better in our work.